In the 7th decade of the 1st century AD, the Roman army, under the leadership of Agricola, had moved vigorously through Brigantian territory in the north of England, before launching the invasion of Scotland in AD 79. As the military machine moved northwards, so the infrastructure to support the army was put in place. In the west at Chester, a fortress was built as a base for the 2nd Legion, whilst in the east, at York, another was constructed for the 9th Legion. It was therefore imperative that rapid communication was made possible between these two important military centres, approximately 110 miles apart. A direct road was therefore built linking the two forts. It ran from Chester to Manchester, on to Saddleworth, and crossed the Pennines to the west of Huddersfield, and then continued via Tadcaster to York. In our area, a fort was constructed on the west side of the Pennine crossing at Castleshaw near Delph, whilst on the eastern side there was another fort at Slack near Outlane. As the crow flies, these two forts are about 7.5 miles apart, but given the nature of the terrain, not even the Romans could build a straight stretch of road between the two. What the actual course of this road was between the two forts has been, throughout the 20th century at least, a source of confusion and some controversy. The generally accepted route, promoted by Margery in his Roman Road Book and then by the Ordnance Survey, was that on leaving Castleshaw, the road turned north towards March Hill, and then east, following the line of what is now the A640 Huddersfield to Rochdale Road, before passing close to Slack. However, there was very little, if any, archaeological evidence to support this route. It also contradicts the suggestion of several earlier historians in the 18th and 19th centuries that the road actually crossed the Pennines by Gilbert's and Pule Hill and on towards Marsden. Even the 1854 map of the Ordnance Survey describes the road at Gilbert's as Roman. Fresh impetus was given to the argument in 1973, thanks to the eagle eye and historical curiosity of Slathwaite farmer George Dransfield. He was aware of a raised trackway crossing his fields on Moorside Edge, which did not seem to fit in with the infrastructure of his land as it now existed. He suggested that his friend, Norman Lunn, then a leading figure in the Archaeological Society, might like to investigate. Thanks to Google Earth, the trackway shows up quite clearly in the satellite image of 2002, but a year later, in 2003, there was little trace of the feature. So much depends on light, shadow, crop conditions when the photographs are taken. Norman and a team from the Society opened a trench across the feature, and excavations were carried out, often under difficult winter conditions. There are, unfortunately, few photographs of this work, but the conclusion was that a stretch of Roman road had definitely been discovered. The Society returned to the site almost 20 years later to confirm their initial interpretation, and the photos taken in 1991 show the classic agar profile of a Roman road. The question now was, what was a piece of Roman road doing apparent isolation in a field in Slathwaite? Since the Romans were unlikely to have built this stretch of road just for the fun of it, the implication was that it was coming from somewhere and going somewhere else, the most likely candidates being the forts at Castleshaw and Slack, in spite of what Margery and the Ordnance Survey claimed. So at various times over the next 30+ years, the Society devoted a lot of effort and resources into plugging the gaps on either side of the Moorside Edge Road. It is a task which continues to this day. In fact, where the road leaves the fort at Castleshaw and climbs steeply up to Millstone Edge on Stanage, it can be clearly seen on aerial images. In particular, the drainage ditches stand out. On reaching the summit, the Roman road builders hacked out a cutting through the rock to take the road up onto the boggy plateau. The Pennine Way now passes the top of this cutting, and it can still be walked by any ambitious hiker. The road then crosses the boggy plateau at what is almost the narrowest stretch of boggy ground in the Pennines, another example of the Roman skill for surveying the landscape to find the most appropriate route. Here we see members of the society recently confirming the existence of the road on the boggy plateau by probing. As it crosses the plateau, the Roman road, confirmed by excavation, is shared for part of its length by a section of Blind Jack Metcalfe's turnpike road of the late 18th century. It is also this section of road which is described as Roman on the old 1854 OS map. It seems likely that Metcalfe robbed some stone from the Roman road in the construction of the turnpike, and it is possible here to walk on the Roman or turnpike road, where recently stone flags have been placed to create a footpath and to encounter excessive wear. The road would have continued along the line of Metcalfe's road towards and then past the cottages known as Gilbert's. At this point it climbed to its highest point onto a spur of Pule Hill known as Warlow. From the archaeological perspective, this was probably the most rewarding in terms of finds and structures from the Roman period. Some damage has been done at this point by later quarrying work, but the partial foundations of what is being interpreted as a possible signal station were uncovered. This is by no means a fanciful suggestion, since we know that on the German frontier extensive use was made of signal towers. There were no fewer than 900. The one on Warlow offered us a sight line to Wholestone Moor above Slack, where another tower perhaps completed the link to the fort. Also, another tower would have been needed on Millstone Edge to make the link with Castleshaw. No evidence of such a tower was found, but it may have been built entirely of wood and therefore left no trace. And here in this section we can see some of the finds made at Warlow, including a later packhorse trail, also conveniently making use of the Roman road structure. The most recent dig on the road has been carried out by the Society in the summer of 2015, when a trench was opened up close to Manor House Farm on Pule Hill, to bring the road closer to the centre of Marsden. On both sides of the roads, really deep drainage channels were excavated, and from this point it is but a short drop downhill into Marsden. here we see the really deep drainage ditches on both sides of the road near Manor House Farm. It seems likely also that the Roman road is underneath the present Marsden town gate, the use of the word gate here meaning road, perhaps being significant. It is in Marsden that we find one of the major missing links in the course of the road. Did it cross the River Colne here to the north bank, perhaps somewhere close to the present-day Western Court in the centre of Marsden, or did it continue along the south bank of the river and cross at a point closer to Slathwaite? The search has been most difficult in this area because of all the later earthworks associated with the building of the canal and the railway. After Marsden, the road was once again positively identified with excavations at Upper Holme. It was near here that the possible Roman milestone was discovered, now known as the Dial or Devil's Stone. It can be seen today in the grounds of Slathwaite Manor House. In his commonplace book, John Kay states that the stone was discovered in 1587 at Boothbank Clough. It is from excavations in this area that some of the most impressive and convincing evidence of the road emerged. It is almost 7 metres in width, beautifully constructed and in a perfect state of preservation. As the original report on this dig stated, it is a road of quality. Further on from Upper Holme, the course of the road in Clough House Bridge area was traced by probing, and the presence of road material was found on the western side of North Lane, the road then running down to the stream at Marydale Clough, which the Roman road must have crossed, close to the present bridge on Clough House Lane. On the stream bed there was evidence of a possible Roman ford. From this point to the section on Moorside Edge there is some uncertainty of the exact course of the road, but particularly intriguing is the area close by bears the name Castle, a name which is frequently found with Roman connections. The section of Roman road on Moorside Edge has already been mentioned, since it was the discovery here which provoked the exploration of the whole route. Having established beyond doubt the course of the road from Castleshaw to Moorside Edge, the final challenge was to complete the link from there to the fort at Slack. The continuation of the road north-eastwards was clearly shown on aerial photographs, at least as far as Waller Clough, and at Waller Clough excavation uncovered an abundance of stone. However, a deep ditch on one side pointed to a presence of the road going forward to Wholestone Moor. The next question to answer, did the road go round Wholestone Moor, either on the west or the east, or did it climb over the top? Exploring this part of the route carried the excavations on the road into the first decade of the 21st century, some 40 years after the first trenches on Moorside Edge. Probing, followed by the opening of 2 trenches, showed that the road ran round the west side of Wholestone Moor, approximately halfway up the hillside. An interesting feature of both trenches was the wheel rut running caused by wagon traffic, not something found on other stretches of the road. One interpretation of this was that this particular stretch of road continued in use in the post-Roman period, perhaps into the Middle Ages. We had a visitor's day on this particular excavation, and large numbers puffed their way up the steep hill to see what we had uncovered. A gap remains between Wholestone Moor and the known course of the road at Outlane. It is unlikely that this gap will ever be closed due to the impact at this point of the massive earthworks carried out during construction of the M62 motorway. And here, a picture from 1968 shows a rescue dig uncovering the Roman road, now lost beneath the M62. At Slack Fort itself, excavation work has recently been carried out, not by the Society but by a commercial team of archaeologists as a rescue dig prior to an extension to the golf club house, which now sits on top of part of the fort. This dig uncovered the road which linked the west gate of the fort with the York-Chester Roman road, now lost beneath the M62. We can see it here, slightly yellow colour between the two yellow lines. This video concludes with a sequence of maps showing the course of the road from its full length, from Castleshaw across to Slack, and then a series of photographs from the past showing many of the members of the Society who carried out this marathon piece of archaeological investigation.